Go.
Me?
Yeah.
Well, I thought she said she was going to do the quote. Okay, sorry. Welcome to Real Women Real Estate Podcast, episode 14. My name is Ebony.
I'm Kimberly.
I'm Courtney.
And today we are talking about all things foreclosure. We would say woot woot, but it's not that exciting, right, guys?
No, it's not. It depends, right? We'll kind of get into that.
Yeah, this is an informational episode. So we're going to be talking to people who may be potentially going through foreclosure, maybe people thinking about buying a house that has been foreclosed, or people who have maybe gone through the foreclosure process themselves. So before we get started, we have a quote for you. Courtney, would you like to read the quote?
I would. So the quote for today is continuous effort, not strength or intelligence, is the key to unlocking our potential. And that's by Winston Churchill. And the reason I wanted to read that quote is because it's all about like a money mindset. It's all about effort, not necessarily intelligence. And so if you go back to our episode 2, we all talk about money mindset, growth mindset versus fixed mindset.
Mm-hmm.
That's deep.
Yep.
Whew. Okay, so back to foreclosures. Let's talk about what foreclosure is, why it happens, how it works, and how to prevent it. So foreclosure is the process that a lender takes. They use that to take back a house from borrowers who can't pay their mortgage. I think everyone knows that, but I think it's important to understand why foreclosures happen in the first place and how you can avoid the process. The first important thing to note about foreclosure is that the process varies state by state. Typically, it's going to fall into one or two categories: judicial versus non-judicial. If it's judicial, it's going to require a court proceeding, and it's going to require, a little bit of a longer timeline than non-judicial. So let's take it a step back. How does one even get into foreclosure, right? So the first step that happens is typically the borrower, someone who's taken out a mortgage loan, they default. If their payment defaults, if they've missed at least one payment, it can start that default clock. And the important thing to remember is that a mortgage is a contract. So as a homeowner or a borrower, if you fail to make a payment, then you are technically defaulting on your contract. You have violated that contract, and the mortgage company or bank has the right to recoup their loss. So it's very important to note that default, varies according to the mortgage. It's important to read your mortgage documents. But until you bring the loan current or make an arrangement with the lender, your loan will remain in default. So after the payment has gone in default, what happens is, and this is really in all states, but it kind of varies as far as how it happens, but a notice of default goes out. Those are also known as 90 days. It kind of goes in 90-day cycles. So what happens is that is public notice is served to the homeowner. And it's basically letting them know, like, hey, you've defaulted on your loan. This is how much you owe. This is how to remedy that. And it starts that foreclosure clock. If you have ever gone on like Zillow or another kind of real estate, site where you can see houses and you see pre-foreclosure, that means that the notice of default has been sent to the borrower. And so like the time is ticking. It doesn't mean necessarily that they have a sell date, which I'll explain in a little bit, but it does mean that they are experiencing some hardship and that this property is likely to be sold or auctioned off. So the next step after that notice of default has been submitted to the borrower and made public is a notice of trustee sale. So if the loan has not been brought current within those 90 days, then a notice of trustee sale or a notice of auction is posted. That is also public record, and it goes to the county court. Sometimes in some states, the notice of default and the notice of trustee sales are combined, and they just kind of do it in one fell swoop. But again, that is public knowledge, and it has all of the details on when the public auction is going to be, how much is going to be sold, and where the auction is going to be located. One of the things I found really interesting in researching foreclosure is that the reason why all of this has to be public, I know a lot of people are like, why do y'all have my information? How is this made known? It's because banks back in the day used to just be able to take somebody's house back. So they could say, you know, like in the Great Depression era, they could just say, oh, you know, you didn't make this payment and we're taking your house back. And there's no proof. Like the borrower has no resources to get their house back. So the public notice of default, notice of trustee sale, all of that is made actually to protect the borrower, because if the bank or the lender does not follow those steps the right way, then the house can't go into foreclosure. And in states where there's a judicial foreclosure process, they're really, really keen about that. Like everything has to be followed to the T. So even though it may be embarrassing to the borrower, it's actually for protection. So the next step after notice of trustee sale is the actual trustee sale or the auction, the public auction. So what happens is the property is placed for auction and it goes to the highest bidder who meets all the necessary requirements. The lender or the attorney representing the lender calculates the bid, and they include how much is left on the loan, any liens, any unpaid taxes, attorney costs, basically anything associated with the sale, because the bank at that point is trying to get their money back. So once the highest bidder has been confirmed and the sale is completed, the winning bidder gets the trustee's deed, and the property is then owned by the purchaser, who gets the property right away. In some states, there is a redemption period that can vary, 30 days, 90 days, to try to give the homeowner a chance to get their property back. I think, that's pretty
California.
rare.
Yeah, and in California, you have an extensive redemption period. Even just right before that deed changes, you can pay the fees, you can pay all of the, not only pay the loan back, but if you pay the fees back as well and get on some sort of program, they will give you the house back. You have almost a number amount of opportunities to get the house back in California. It's pretty unbelievable.
That's crazy. Because in my opinion, it makes it hard to resolve the issue, right? Let's just sell it, get it going.
But the bank doesn't want to own the house. The bank is in the business of making money in ways that don't involve owning assets to that extent. That is a hassle. So if you are going to pay all these fees back, which is how banks make money, through fees. So that's their bread and butter. So if you are going to pay the mortgage back, or you're going to set up a plan and you're going to pay these fees back, then we'll start the process over with you. That you give me that. So that it's their incentive to want to help you out. Yeah.
But also people can abuse that, right? Because it's like,
yes,
we've run into as investors, we run into so many homeowners who just stop paying their mortgage. And in Texas, they don't care, that once it's foreclosed, like they're not rushing to take your house back. Cause like you said, they make money off of getting those fees. They're not rushing to take the house back, but once it's sold, it's sold. But you did make a good point about the bank doesn't want the property back. If the bank does get the property back, meaning it doesn't go to a seller or to a buyer, during the auction, then the lender actually becomes the owner. And so that's a term called real estate owned, or REO. I know that people have seen that probably. It's pretty popular when you're looking for a house, but it's just the bank owned property. And so what happens is the bank will hire like a broker or like a real estate asset manager to manage the property and to try to get it sold. Sometimes the lender will remove liens and other expenses in order to make the property more attractive to potential home buyers. But ultimately, like Courtney said, it's a liability on their books. On the borrower's end, though, after the foreclosure, the borrower can typically stay in the home until it is sold. But after that, then the eviction notice comes, and it just pretty much demands that you get out of the property and vacate the premises. In some states, a sheriff can actually come to the property, and it gets really dramatic. It's really sad. In other states, they don't have a sheriff come, and the eviction process is a little different. So they give you time to get your property and belongings out. And then if it's in that state, sometimes they just change the locks. Yeah.
Yep.
But I mean, it's pretty rare, I think. From my
try to do whatever they can to get you to leave. They'll even do like a cash for keys.
Yeah.
To try to get you out, because what they want to do is avoid you from vandalizing the property, taking out pipings, and just avoiding destroying the asset.
Yeah.
And just decreasing the value of the home. So the sooner I can get you out, just the better it is.
Yep.
You know.
Well,
so they have an incentive for that.
Yeah, the cash for keys is part of the loss mitigation process. So that typically happens before it goes to foreclosure. After it's been foreclosed, you can't get any cash. They just want you out.
Yeah, okay.
But they will sometimes put your stuff in storage for you to try to let you get it at a later date. But usually, you got to get out. So that, in a nutshell, is the foreclosure process, starting from when you first miss a payment to when you get evicted. So, of course, it's different in every state, every county, but that's just a high-level overview of what's going on when the foreclosure process is going on. So, a question that we get a lot is, should you buy a house that has been foreclosed on?
Yes.
So, I'm not a real estate agent, so I won't answer that. Courtney, you want to take that?
Yeah, so I think the bank is motivated to get the property sold. And so they're going to negotiate like a price down for you, and and sometimes you can kind of cut costs if you do this. So you'll have like negotiate the price, down payment, closing costs, your escrow length, all of those things can be negotiated that wouldn't necessarily be negotiated with someone that you're dealing with the actual seller versus the bank. So, there's some advantages in regards to the bank just being motivated. Like we talked about before, this is not the type of asset that the bank wants to have. They don't want to own, and not liability. It's an asset because it's something that we own. So that bank is motivated to get that property sold and negotiate down the price in order to get it sold. The title is going to be clear because they know exactly what's on it. So the buyer was not going to take on any liens on the mortgage and back taxes from the prior owner, something that you'll have to deal with, or you'll find out later if you're going to escrow and you go and check the title of it, and you find out that there's a mechanics lien on it from fixing this roof. The time that you'll have to kind of take on. So you won't have to deal with any of that. The inspections, mortgage financing are all allowed within a normal, due diligence time frame. And the house, for the most part, it will be vacant. So you will not be entering a home, or let's say you're doing this COVID-19, you're looking for something, a house that's been vacant for a while. With the foreclosure home, you're gonna have to deal with that because there's nobody in the home.
Yeah.
And property will usually be listed on the MLS. So if you're into Zillow and these other websites, Zillow has a listing of foreclosure properties. There's even banks like Bank of America, may have a section, well, they'll have foreclosure properties and things like that. So you don't necessarily have to go through an agent to see them, but you do want the agent to actually help you negotiate the price down and do the paperwork, because that's the other thing that's really extensive, is just the paperwork aspect of it, a lot of due diligence in dealing with the bank.
Yes.
Also, like REO, close or sell homes within a normal escrow time period, and those are the REOs, real estate owned by the lender. They can close within. They're getting better. They used to take a really long time to close, but the banks are getting better now and getting faster when it comes to closing those properties. So those are some advantages, but there's also some really big disadvantages to a foreclosure property. A bank is not going to do any repairs for you. There's no negotiation in regards to that. So that house is going to be sold to you as is. And
Correct.
if there's something that you see that you feel like is too much of an undertaking, and you're looking for this foreclosure property because it's your first time buying a house and this is the way you want to go to save money, do you also want to live in a home that has deferred maintenance on it? Because if they couldn't afford to pay the mortgage, then they're not going to be able to afford to take care of the home and repair things that need to be fixed. So do you want to deal with a roof that you have to potentially fix? You want to deal with just things that come with being a new homeowner on top of that deferred maintenance. And then a bank will usually require that additional paperwork. And that's what I mean in regards to like the time frame. They're just going to require more paperwork because they don't want to go through that process of having a foreclosure and then having somebody else take over the home that also needs to go into foreclosure. So you're going to need to really prove that you have skin in the game. Number one, when you go down to put a deposit down for that house, and you're going to also want to have credit score as well as money to be able to afford that house, the down payment, everything in regards to your finances will need to be in lockstep and in order, and done within a timely manner. If someone is the agent, whoever you're dealing with, if they're not doing things within a timely manner, a lot of things that just either fall through the cracks, then that deal will most likely fall through the cracks. And the other thing is, so a bank can't provide disclosures to a property, like history or condition or things like that. That's going to have to be getting just through investigation.
Oh yeah, because they don't know. Yeah,
they don't know.
Yeah,
right. They don't know any of this stuff. So these are just some of the disadvantages. So if you are an investor looking for a home and this doesn't matter to you because you're going to turn around and flip it anyway, or you're going to turn around and reinvest probably, or it's going to be something that you were going to put money into, hey, great. I would say do that. This is a great way to save money. But if you are a first-time home buyer, this is going to be, a home that you're trying to raise your kids. You really need to investigate the property on your own, or have a really good agent or team around you that you trust, that will look into this home and will give you some advice as to whether this is a good house for you to purchase as your first home. Yeah. So I would advise to just have some cash handy and do some research, because just everyone thinks that, oh, I'm going to save money by getting a foreclosure. This is a deal.
Yeah, and you might be buying a money pit.
Exactly.
So there's a flip side to that too, from the investor standpoint. Excuse me. From the investor standpoint, talking about foreclosures versus pre-foreclosures, a lot of times that we will go in and help get the house before foreclosure. So that would be a pre-foreclosure, right? Well, there's also times where the bank is going to be against you in that, because this is something I experienced last year with a client of ours, where they were being bought in a group. And so that's the thing. A lot of times the bank is going to sell to a larger investor. So of course we're smaller investors. We're only trying to help one or two people out of their foreclosures. But if that house has already now been put into this lot of foreclosures that's being bought by a larger, buying loans or assuming loans. So other banks or larger corporations will assume these loans. And if they're in foreclosure, they will make it difficult to try to get, or in pre-foreclosure, they will make it difficult to get that house out sometimes. So that's another thing that's a setback on working on pre-foreclosures, because you might be, okay, they have everything you have to pay off, but then they're moving slow on certain other things because they're actually wanting it to go with this group because they already have it grouped up and they already in their heads are like, okay, we already have a sell date. All of these are going to go, these 10 houses have sell dates and they're going to go to this X person. Well, if you come in as a smaller investor and you're trying to help out your client by getting them out of foreclosure, then that could potentially run into some time. We actually ended up able to do it, but it did cause some issues with the bank, and it was like pulling teeth. So that's another part of investing when you're looking at investing into foreclosures or pre-foreclosures. It's a lot of time. So if you are not wanting to spend your time on this, if you're looking for a quick get rich quick scheme, foreclosures is not that. It's not that on any level. They are good investments, or can be good investments, and can be potentially great to help someone stop their foreclosure. But please know that when you go into this, that there is going to take time in doing so.
Yeah. One thing I forgot to mention before, Kim, you made a good point about how the banks work. So I've actually been on both sides of how the banks work in foreclosure. And the best way I can explain it is there's two trains going toward the same destination, and whoever gets there first wins. The bank gets incentivized on either side.
Correct.
I mean, let's just keep it honest. So there's the loss mitigation side and there's the foreclosure side. So loss mitigation is anything that is being done in order to mitigate or stop the loss of your home. So when we talk about how to avoid a foreclosure, how to keep that from happening, on the bank side, you have the option of short sale, you have cash or keys, deed in lieu, loan modifications. The bank is not going to help you file bankruptcy, but they do have departments for if you file bankruptcy to stop the foreclosure. But basically, they have what's called usually a dedicated loan specialist that will work with you to help you keep from going into foreclosure. But on the flip side, which I've been on that side working to help stop the foreclosure, but on the flip side, there's also, they're usually called timeline specialists. And what they're doing is working with that attorney to make sure that attorney has everything that they need from a paperwork standpoint to foreclose on the house. They also have an investor relations team, which makes sure, like Kim was saying, that the asset, once it's taken back, goes to the right investor. They also have a bankruptcy team that if you do file bankruptcy, they can do what's called a motion for relief to prove that you just did that to stop the bankruptcy. You're not really in need. So basically any kind of thing you can throw at them, they have something for them for that to keep pushing it through so they can get the asset back if need be. So yeah, we talked about how to avoid a foreclosure. There's short sale, deed in lieu, loan modifications. You can also work with a nonprofit. There are nonprofits out there like NACA, which they're really good about stopping foreclosures. They have a team of attorneys and they have like different programs to help you get out of the foreclosure process. But then also working with an investor, like Kim said, like we actually work with homeowners to stop them, to get them out of the foreclosure process. And we can be really creative. We can be more creative than the bank is, because the bank is tied to different regulatory guidelines like the CFPB, HUD, VA. Depending on what type of loan you have, they have to stick to those guidelines when it comes to your loan. So there are a lot of options out there. I think the worst thing you could do is just walk away and not, ignore it.
Let that get on your record. Exactly.
Yeah.
And an agent can help too, because there's marketing out there that an agent can do, and you can be flexible. I think people sometimes don't want to go with an agent because they think the commission. And a lot of times people, agents, an investor, they think that they're targeting you because of the fact that you are back, you've missed some payments and you're a motivated seller. So there's a lot of scams and things out there attacking those people. But like you said, the best thing to do is be able to reach out to somebody and just know what you're doing to avoid those scams, right? Because there are foreclosure scams since 2018 are just,
it's
prevalent.
Crazy. I ran into somebody last year who was paying somebody like, I think like $5,000
Yes.
to help stop the foreclosure. And I was like, but
Yes.
you're only like $10,000 behind on your loan. Like
why would you even pay that?
Like
You do that.
that's
Yeah.
not how this works. But
exactly. So you want to like ask,
yeah.
just like ask to give a power of attorney or some steps, and then just some of the things like that I've just researched for car, right? So ask for money up front before providing any service to, and this is just to avoid scams, right? Require payments only in the form of cash, cashier's check, or wire transfer, and instructs your, or contact your lender, obtain a lawyer or a housing counselor, somebody to advise you before you just start paying for this, because stopping mortgage fraud is just a business in itself. And so there are people out there to help you in that foreclosure process. But there's just some steps, just avoid just filling out paperwork and contracts and things like that, because what they're doing is they're feasting off of the fact that you're desperate and that desperation. Yeah. So just try to avoid that as well.
So let's talk about what happens if you aren't able to stop the foreclosure. What happens to you from a financial standpoint and so on and so forth. So the biggest thing that people probably are familiar with is like the credit score drop. I've heard it could go anywhere from 300 to 500 points, which
yikes,
it's a lot. A foreclosure is a lot. It's right up there with bankruptcy. So, you definitely want to try to avoid that as much as possible. It could also make it really difficult for you to get a loan in the future. That is something that is not a death sentence when it comes to getting another mortgage, but it just makes it harder, right? Because you have that on your credit history. I know it can make it hard to get a job, especially if you're trying to get a job in the financial services industry. They really pay attention to that. Something that a lot of people aren't familiar with is what's called deficiency judgment. So essentially, if you foreclose and you have that amount, and let's say the bank isn't able to recoup their full amount, they can actually come back and get that money. Like, it's not necessarily a closed door. That, of course, depends on what state you're in. California is like, nah, fam, we're not doing deficiency judgments here. But it's definitely something to keep in mind. It's not just a closed book on that. Some banks are really, what's the word I'm looking for? Persistent.
Rigid.
Oh, okay.
Or rigid, yeah. I mean, it really depends on the loan. Like, if you have like a FHA loan and it's like, $200,000, they probably won't do that. But if you have like a jumbo loan or like a special loan, heck yeah. The bank is going to try to get, and they have the resources. Let's just put it like that. They have the resources to get whatever they need to get back. So it's definitely not something that you want to just stick your head in the sand and think it's going to go away once it forecloses. There definitely are some consequences that you want to try to avoid if possible.
Yeah.
So that's all I had. Hopefully, this was very informative. We hope nobody is going through foreclosure. Oh, one more thing I wanted to touch on was with Corona. With Corona, there have been a lot of questions on if courts are still foreclosing due to coronavirus, shutting down courts and, people not wanting to lose their homes due to job issues and stuff. It really depends on your loan, the type of loan you have, because if you have a government-backed loan, I know those were halted, but some private loans are still foreclosing.
If you have FHA, it's safe. However, if you do not, more than likely, you might want to check on that.
Yeah. So don't just assume that because coronavirus is going on, your house won't go on and they won't actually have the auction. I've talked to the courts here in Dallas County, in Collin County and Tarrant County, and they all say that it's up to the lender and to the trustee. It's not up to the court.
Private lender is.
Yeah, whoever the private lender is. So that's just the FYI, knowledge is power, communication is power. But at the end of the day, we, would hate to see anybody go through this on top of what everything else is going on with Corona.
Yeah, because you want to watch out for that forbearance. We talked about that in previous episode. Yeah. They could tack on that loss, that missed payment from that 3-month period. It could either go at the end of the loan, or it could all be asked for, upfront. So if it's a private loan or Wells Fargo, you just want to figure out who is servicing the loan.
100%. Okay.
All right.
Well, this is a quick episode.
Well, I did want to touch on a couple of things right quick just before we go off. Sorry. So I know we talked about how to avoid a foreclosure, and this is not just me speaking for an investor. This is speaking from me being on both sides. Obviously, short sales is great because you can potentially short sell the house and get rid of it, right? And then we talked about loan modifications. The ones that I honestly would stay away from would be loan modifications, bankruptcies, because at the end of the day, with a bankruptcy, and people are quick to say that, oh, I'm going to go just file bankruptcy. But what you don't realize with a bankruptcy is that now you're paying the attorney fees and you're paying your just like Ebony spoke to, you're paying attorney fees, and now you're still paying your mortgage. When you do loan modifications, you're now taking what you've been behind on and putting that into a new loan. So, or modifying that. So now your payment could have two different payments. And we've gone through this with a couple of other, people that we've helped out, and how it can compound. And if they had the knowledge ahead of time to know what exactly they could avoid in this, they could have stopped this. So this goes along with our conversations that we've talked about in previous episodes, and even on the with the episode that we had with Mark, which was episode 12. But we talked about, being house broke. And when you get to, even when you are starting to realize that you might get behind, you probably want to start looking at options then, instead of waiting until I'm going to catch up, or I'm 6 months behind, or, I'm getting 3 months behind. Because again, especially with COVID going on right now, the banks aren't playing games on that. So if you do not have a federal backed loan, they could potentially close on you, foreclose on you for just being, like Ebony said before, one payment behind. So when you think about the things that you want to do to stop your foreclosure, honestly, some of the ones that you're thinking are just going to compound your debt. And that's what we're trying to, help our community and give, information and educate our community on, that some of these things actually make your debt worse. So you may, want to speak to some professionals or people who are in it like us, or people who have been on both sides. Because again, I talked about in the previous one of our beginning episodes is, I had been foreclosed on, not by my fault, but because I did an investment and it just didn't go right. And I was in college. So with that being said, I've been on both sides, and I would avoid probably bankruptcies and loan modifications at all possible. Yeah. That's just my 2 cents. So you guys, that was a really quick episode.
Yeah, and we're here. We aren't attorneys, but we all have experience in this space. So, and we've helped out a few people in DMs and private messages and emails. So feel free to shoot us a message if you have any questions. Everything is really private. We won't put you on blast or anything like that. But hope that helps.
I just wanted to say that, it's an overwhelming process, and we could go on a tangent, but I think the episode is not that it's short, is that it's informative, and it's not a drag on. There's a reason for it, and we want to keep it specific to foreclosure, because there can be all type of avenues that you can go into in regards to short sale and scams and things like that. But we want to keep it just all about foreclosures, so that it doesn't go off into all these different avenues, and really talk about, prevention, and what are some things that you can do to help in really understanding what the process means. Because it seems so simple. When we wanted to do this episode, I was like, well, everyone knows what a foreclosure is, but there's these technical things, and there's these nuances and advantages and disadvantages and terms that not everybody knows. And so I think it's helpful to sometimes just keep it simple.
Yeah, it's important not to get in the wormholes because there's a lot of different rabbit holes, not wormholes.
Wormholes.
I'm so bad at saying, but yeah, it's important not to go down the rabbit holes.
Yeah. Yeah. So reach out. There's a lot of programs, there's a lot of resources. In California, we have foreclosure prevention resources out for you. So a lot of things is the embarrassment. I think that's the number one thing. Even when you sell a home and you've lost that home, that realtor does not take on the foreclosure property that initially sold it because they're embarrassed. They don't want to go back. Things were high and I met you when things were good. I don't want to come back to you and let you know that things are bad. And so I think just the process of that, everyone just, is understanding of situation and things happen, especially during these times. We know what the employment rate is. We know that, not everyone is experiencing good times right there. There are a lot of people experiencing hardships. So this is not an embarrassing times. And we did this episode because it's timely and because this is real. People are really experiencing this right now. And, people want to know what their options are. So that's all I got.
Yeah, I know we're trying to get out, but I will say you hit the nail on the head when you're talking about embarrassment, because of the people that we've worked with that have gone years and years without paying their mortgage, it does go back to they were just too embarrassed.
Yeah.
They didn't know what to do. They didn't, want to talk to anybody. They're working with the bank, but they're not leveraging their resources. So you hit the nail on the head about not being embarrassed.
We all going through something.
Yeah,
it's just different. We're all going through something. So nobody can judge you for what your situation is. And if they do, you shouldn't be working with them anyway.
Yep.
Word. Damn them.
Word.
Right. All right. Well, thank you, ladies, for this episode. I think it was informative, timely, and just necessary right now. We have to address everything. So I think this was timely.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, y'all. Stay safe. Wash your hands. Flatten the curve.
Absolutely. Flatten the curve.
Bye.
Flatten the curve.